6 wins on the spin, through to the next round of the FA Cup with a tie against Wycombe to come. This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs!
Hi guys, welcome back for another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Acast and get every new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us across all social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page. We're also on YouTube, Pinterest, Tumblr the lot, and for all the links to all e-Spurs platforms, just head to our website, which is www.espurs.blogspot.co.uk. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, we'll be talking about the 2-0 win over Aston Villa as we successfully negotiated ourselves through to round 4. We'll be taking your questions as always for tonight's panel, and we'll be previewing the game against West Brom to come. So, let's introduce the panel that will be taking us through the next hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. First, we've got Ian.
Good evening, Rick. Looking forward to tonight.
Good evening, Ian, and same to you. And we've got Jason.
Evening, mate. Good to be back again.
Indeed. Always good to be back. We're going to come to you first tonight, Ian. Far from a convincing win, but probably expected when you make 9 changes from the previous game. Was it all about result over performance for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we've been in enough sort of like cup competitions recently where we've made the changes and then we've gone out of the competition. Whereas yesterday I was quite comfortable with not only the personnel that was selected, but with the result. And as you said, the result for me did slightly overshadow the performance because I think we would all perhaps say that the first half was pretty nondescript. Could have quite easily had a snooze and read a paper in the first half, but the second half improved, and then brought Ali on, and within 11 odd minutes we were 1-0 up, and not long after that we were 2-0 up, and it was job done. And in the course of the 90 odd minutes, I can't recall apart from a goalmouth scramble and a speculative shot that Vorm easily had covered, I don't recall Vorm having all that much to do. So, a job well done against a very sort of combative Villa side.
It was. And what did you make of the starting lineup? I mean, it's fair to say it was a selection, a mixture of youth as well as Premier League experience, something that in the past maybe when looking at the Cup, Pochettino hasn't necessarily always done. I mean, I look at the Liverpool game in the League Cup at the start of the season, it seemed to very much, although there was a little bit of experience there, it was very much on the youthful side, whereas the side he played yesterday, I think having Toby Alderweireld there alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers and Kevin Wimmer, it just gave that little bit more sense of protection. Did you think the side he fielded yesterday was the right side in your opinion as to who started the game? Definitely,
because not only can you mention the 3 lads that you just have, or do we have Dyer and Winks in the middle, Son, Sissoko, Janssen, which I'm sure we'll come on to later on, and I just think there was a good blend of youth and experience allied with an idea of the incidence of trying to get a team out, of those that perhaps don't get a regular start in the league, and I think it gave them all the opportunity to stake a claim in the cup competitions, and I fully expect a similar 11 to take to the field for the next game against Wycombe, which is I believe at the end of the month, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. It will be right at the end of the month. I'm going to come on to you next, Jace. What did you make of it? We've touched upon a couple of players making a difference. Anyone for you in particular you want to highlight that stood out in the game?
No, I don't think anyone particularly grabbed their chance to, for instance, to replace those that started against Chelsea, against West Brom on Saturday. I thought Winks was neat and tidy in possession, but we know that Winks is that. Whether he did enough to displace Dembele, I don't think so. I thought Davis and Trippier, to me, really showed that they're fullbacks that were playing as wing-backs, whereas Rose and Walker, we know, can do it. I thought Davis and Trippier, even though they had their moments within the game, and obviously Ben Davies had the key moment, but to me, he still looked a good fullback that was playing out of position as a wing-back. And there was a couple of times, wasn't there, in the first half where Toby smacked balls out to him and he didn't have the pace to get there. And the one time he did get the pace to get there, he had to be offside to make sure he got there. So it was, I think if you're going to play with wing-backs, it definitely needs to be Walker or Rose. So we certainly learned that from the game. And let's be fair, the first half was just awful, wasn't it? And my missus here was more interested in trying to work out if the rumours about Dion Dublin were true at half-time than anything that had gone on for 45 minutes before it. But second half, Ali coming on certainly lifted the tempo of the game. I think it lifted the crowd. But it was only when Toby went off and we switched to 4, brought Nkudu on, suddenly we had a genuine bit of width and rather than what I call false width through Ben Davies. And I'd say we got a little bit lucky with the first goal. And, just my feeling was that when Toby went off, I think maybe a few people thought Dyer would go into the back 4 and we'd keep that shape. But with Dyer staying in midfield, we obviously then went to 4 at the back. But Ben Davies made a run as if he was still playing at wing-back within, 30 seconds of the substitution. So whether he quite got the message through that he was supposed to now be at left-back, not as a wing-back, I don't know. But he suddenly turned up miles out of where he perhaps should have been. And thank God he did, because it was an absolutely fantastic header, which I thought made an OK cross from Nkudu into a good one. I wouldn't say it was a super cross because it was about 2 feet behind Ben Davies. But it was an absolutely fantastic header. But it would have been interesting to see if there had been an extra 2 or 3 minutes whether Ben Davies actually would have been in that position once he'd been told to play at left-back.
Let me ask you, Jace, just on that point you said about Nkudu. I mean, for me personally, although Ali came on and affected the game, I think Nkudu, he brought that kind of pace, flair, attacking intent that we just didn't have there in the first half. I mean, there has been a clamour to see this guy on a more regular basis. Does he give us an option that we haven't got in the squad?
I think whenever he's come on, he's had useful little cameos, and you can't have asked him to do much more than he has done when he's come on. But certainly, I think if you look at it as if we take it that we're not playing Aston Villa, if we take that as a Premier League game and Danny Rose is there, then I think Nkudu in front of Danny Rose restricts the space Danny Rose can play in. So, whether he's done enough to really get in front of or get into our first team plans, he's certainly worth keeping on the bench. And for me, the better ball he actually played was the one later when he flashed it across goal and Josh Onuma couldn't quite get onto it. But yeah, there's certainly a little bit of pace, and particularly with West Brom in mind, who'll park the bus. We know that for sure on Saturday. Maybe, if the game's going against you and with 10 minutes to go you're all square, then there's nothing to lose by throwing him on. But I still don't see him playing a big part as the season goes on.
Ian, going to come to you next. We haven't spoken about him yet, although the whole of social media was yesterday. Vincent Janssen, I think it's fair to say that he struggled yesterday to get into the game. I mean, for me, he looks very, very low on confidence at the moment. I think he was trying his best to get involved in terms of the hold-up play and the game craft in terms of trying to build the attacks for Spurs. What do you make of it for him? You're quite a level-headed guy, so what's your perspective on it? Can you see this player having a future at Spurs?
I hope so. For me, he's always in the wrong places at the wrong times, whereas Kane has that ability to drift out wide, and what happens is that it provides Ali with a space to get into the box, which we witnessed last week against Chelsea. Whereas when Janssen plays, I don't see that same sort of movement from the other players.
Yeah, I agree.
To do what the Erikssons and the Alis do for Kane, and I think that Janssen is a good footballer. He just tries too hard. I know we used to say it about Soldado. I just want a flash across the box, hit him on the knee, a la Rooney, and fly into the top corner. That's basically, what I want to see. And the longer it goes on, the more fractious, is that the word, he becomes to want to score out of open play. I definitely think there's a player there, and hopefully, a bit like what Lyle said about Nkudu the other week. I just hope he's one for the future. But if Kane gets injured, then he's one for now. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not sure he's ready for that, for Premier League performances where he is now. So I'm a bit sort of in between a rock and a hard place when it comes to thinking what we should do with our Vincent.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, if someone turned on a podcast about a year and a half ago, it would seem very similar to the words we were saying about Soldado. He just, again, like you've said there, he seems to be a player that wants to play inside the box. For me yesterday, he was making all the necessary runs, but the service, number one, wasn't there. And number two, when he did get the ball in any kind of attacking area, he just didn't seem to have that kind of composure that Harry Kane seems to have got. I have to ask you, Jace, I mean, to me, I'll be honest, sentiment says, as a Spurs fan, we keep faith with him, but being ruthless, like Ian's just put out there, if Kane, God forbid, is to get injured, is our season seriously in terms of, derailing if we're relying on Janssen?
Well, it certainly would make our season a lot more difficult. It's really difficult with him, isn't it? I mean, I've said in the past that Kane plays much more on that half turn than Janssen does, and he seems to want to back into people, and so often when he does get the ball, he seems to be dead square with his back to goal. But I think, in fairness to him yesterday, you're right, the service into him in that first half was pretty poor, and there was no runners getting into the box for him. But his first touch to me now is starting to get, a couple of times when the ball was delivered into him, you think he doesn't quite get it under control quick enough, and he doesn't seem to have that pace or quick feet to get away from defenders, does he? I mean, Kane's not blessed with pace, but he still seems to be able to drop a shoulder and just get half a yard of shooting space sometimes, whereas Janssen's not even doing that. And, I see the thing today that he's had 33 shots at goal without scoring, but I don't really remember him having 33 chances, if you know what I mean. It was just, was that one little chance yesterday, wasn't he, early in the second half when he kind of bent it straight into the keeper's arms, but it just doesn't look like scoring, does he? It doesn't look like getting on the end of anything, and as Ian says, he's not even in a position usually where there's one going to fly in off his knee. So it's really hard, and it's certainly something we've got to have a serious think about between now and the end of January, because you do feel if Kane was going to be out for 4 or 5 weeks again, that we would definitely be in trouble. That's for sure. Being
cutthroat, Jace, if I had to say yes or no to you, if the option was there to bring another striker in, would you go for it?
Yes.
Yeah. Ian, same to you?
No, totally, 100%, because I just think that
could define our season pretty much.
It could, and as I said, if Kane was to come down, was to succumb to an injury, then I don't know whether Janssen would just slot into the existing framework of, what is it now? What do we play now? 4? Is it 3?
3-5-2, 4-3-3.
3-5. Yeah, whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I just don't know. I just don't know whether Janssen would slot into that. I think we'd need somebody. I don't know who's out there. Help me out, lads.
I know it's harder. I still look at. I know he's not going to come back, but someone like for me, a Jermaine Defoe, a natural goal scorer, would be great. I'm not suggesting Defoe to come back because he's not going to sit on Spurs' bench, that's for sure.
No.
But we do need someone that we can rely upon for goals. But again, it's.
I kind of think, Rick, anyway, you need a third one anyway, because let's be fair. If Janssen play, we think Janssen will start the game against Wickham, for instance. Now, if Vincent Janssen got an injury against Wickham that would rule him out for 6 or 7 weeks, you wouldn't then want Kane to be playing every single Europa game, every single FA Cup game, and every single Premier League game.
Correct.
So for me, I'd still want to see a third one, regardless of if Janssen was scoring goals or not.
I mean, I just wonder now, you look at the league and, if we do beat West Brom, even for a couple of hours, we're up to second. I don't know whether that just kind of gives the board, Levy or whatever, the incentive to think, this Spurs side, they're not far off. I know it's only, we said about 7 points. I mean, it is. Listen, it's not like Ian said. It's mathematically we can do it. So I just, again, it's dependent really on how much the board wanna give Pochettino their backing. I mean, I hate to say it yesterday. Looking at the guy, he does seem low on confidence. For me, we haven't got the right footballers to play to the kind of the advantage to the player. I mean, you saw yesterday, and Kudu comes on already, delivers a ball into the box. We didn't do that all game until he came on. So again, I don't think Spurs are set up to play that way. I mean, Janssen was brought in as a completely different alternative to Kane. I mean, that's, when you look at the game, that seems to be pretty much obvious. But it is a cause for concern. I think those that aren't concerned, I don't know. It's a very difficult one to kind of judge.
Just playing devil's advocate, this is something that we discussed at the game yesterday. Do you think that was the plan all along, to give Janssen 60 minutes, just to see how he would get on? Has he not long had a bit of an injury himself, did I recall?
I mean, I would say, in answer to that question, I think the plan may have been to give him 60 minutes if he scored, and then bring him off, when he's got a goal in the bag. I don't know what you think, Jace. Do you think that might have been the plan? He would have scored, got a couple under his belt as confidence, and then he's kind of, confident in himself in terms of ability in front of goal.
I think it's hard to second guess, isn't it? Because, from my point of view, you could say if he had scored, then, because he's only come back, I understand the 60 minutes business, but if he had scored, then you definitely then don't want to take him off, because maybe then he's got the confidence to go on and get a second or even more. It's difficult, isn't it, with him? It's such a shame, because you can see he wants to do well. He's trying so hard. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe he's just trying a little with the age. And I felt a little bit sorry for him yesterday, in the sense that, when we've seen him before, I wouldn't say his game was any different yesterday, but there hasn't quite been the scrutiny on him. Whereas yesterday, with it being the live game and with the build-up and all the pundits talking about him before the game and half-time, then it's become an even bigger issue, I think, because it was Aston Villa. The fact he didn't score from open play against Gillingham but got a penalty that night, I wouldn't say he performed any better against Gillingham that night. But nobody really picked up on it. It wasn't the live game. We won the game anyway. And so it was kind of glossed over, wasn't it? Whereas last night, it was far more scrutinised in his performance than it has been at any other time.
Let me come on to you, Jace. Heung-min Son has already scored as many goals this season as he did in his previous season for Spurs last season, which was 8. What have you made of him? Is he threatening at all again? I mean, he's a player for me that he flatters to deceive at times. He seems to be looking to break into that first team. When he gets his opportunity in the first team, he fails to perform. Is he always going to be on the fringes for you of this Spurs starting 11?
I certainly think the Son we've seen so far, for me, is always on that fringe. The frustration is, as you say, you can see the talent that's in him. You can see the pace that's in him. He had the cracking little effort from the edge of the box, didn't he? It was going in the top corner, which is a bit similar to his goal at Leicester in the Cup last year, except obviously the keeper kept that one out. But, for me, the first half yesterday, so often when he got it, he kind of wanted to turn around and go towards the halfway line. And I want Son to take players on. I don't care if he loses the ball 4 or 5 times, but I want him to be really... Because we know he's got not express pace, but we know he's one of probably the quicker players of our forward players. And I really wanted him to be taking Villa on and be making those runs in and around Janssen, to give Janssen a little bit of help as well. But the first half, he just didn't do that. And when you see where he scored his goal in the second half from, I kept thinking, why didn't Sissoko as well to that degree? Why weren't they doing that in that first half to really give Janssen a bit of a hand?
No, I completely agree. I think for me, he's always going to be a player for me on the periphery of that starting 11, and until he gets that consistency into his game, it is a frustration of a player, but fingers crossed we will see his best days in a Spurs shirt to come. Ian, to you, finally to wrap it up. Sissoko, another good performance, did you think? An assist?
Yeah, he got an assist. Once he gets going, there's very little stopping him, is there? He's quite a chunky lad, and quite muscular, and got some pace on him when he gets going. And I just thought, it was a decent performance from him, and I think that that's all we need to hope for, and get to the stage where he can start to deliver that on more occasions, and when he's playing for the first 11 in the league. So, since that dreadful game against Leverkusen, what is it? Was it 31 misplaced passes?
Seems like a while back now, because like I say, he has gone on a good run. I mean, I know he can't get too carried away, because it was against Aston Villa of Championship opposition. They didn't really offer much to the game, but again, it's not a bad performance. And I think Harry Winks, again, for me, he does what all Spurs fans or any neutral watching the game is. He just seems to find the simple pass. He makes the game look so easy in terms of his variation of passing, being able to spread the ball. He does seem very, very comfortable on the ball. I think the question maybe is that, can he do it in amongst the bigger teams in the league? Because we've seen him do it.
And I'll tell you what I also found yesterday, Rick, was he's also not afraid to put his foot in. There was a couple of occasions yesterday where I noticed that, whereas some of our midfield players I might not be that up for a battle. He's only a small lad, but he got stuck in yesterday, and that quite pleased me as well.
we've been able to, rest 9 players. I think you've got to give Poch credit for keeping the likes of Wimmer, Trippier, Davis, Dyer, Sissoko and Son happy. I mean, all who you would argue, Jace, very quickly on this point, are probably good enough to get in any side outside the top 6. I mean, how good is Pochettino's man management to be able to keep this squad happy? I mean, are they just simply buying into this team ethic that he's got going at Spurs?
Well, they certainly seem to be buying into that team ethic, and we know from what Lyle was saying behind the scenes that, they've completely bought into everything that he's doing. But there does come the time when they'll want not to play against Aston Villa in the Cup. They'll want to play proper Premier League games. And we know that they're certainly good enough to be playing for most Premier League teams. And it's important that we keep them because you do want quality backups. But as I say, I just thought with, Kevin Wimmer, a little bit disappointed me yesterday in that, again, a couple of times when he got the ball, and you think, come on, bring it forward like Jan did, or Jan can do. Again, a couple of times he came the first 2 or 3 yards, but then instantly went back to Toby, and you miss that crispness of passing and that little bit of energy and pace that the genuine first team players have, and I think you could see why, as good a backups as they are, you can kind of see why they're backups and they're not really pushing for a first team place at the moment.
Again, it's one of those things where I think over time we'll see, but I think overall we've got to be happy with the fact we've rested 9 out of that Chelsea 11 to start and still got the result. I think it really is indicative to the depth of squad we've got now at Spurs. Maybe not necessarily in terms of the striking options, but very much so in terms of midfield and defence. And even Vorm in goal wasn't really tested, but I think he's, like I say, a fairly capable backup, so it's all good to see. Right, guys, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a very, very quick break, and then after, we're going to take your questions for the panel. Hi guys, welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast. Thank you very much for rejoining us. As always, we ask you to get in touch with any questions you have for the guys on a weekly basis, and as always, you get in touch with us in your droves. Tonight, again, as we've mentioned, we've got a host of questions to ask to the guys. We're going to firstly come to you tonight, Jace. We've got the ever-popular Dave Ellis, who gets in touch with the show on a weekly basis. I hope you're well, Dave. Dave asks us, his Twitter handle firstly is @fullback03. After opening the new stadium to the public on Sunday, do you think there's any truth that it'll be ready for next season?
We know that they've missed the first date to confirm with Wembley that they were going there. We know that there's been no talk about season ticket prices for next season at Wembley. And we, by all accounts, the commercial department aren't yet doing too much work to push Wembley on the commercial line. So it may well be that in their minds, they believe there's a possibility, however slim that may be, that we will be at White Hart Lane next year. All we can do, really, can't we, from the Wembley experience this year is keep our own fingers crossed and pray to whatever that we are indeed at White Hart Lane, even if it would be about a 2/3 White Hart Lane, wouldn't it? About just over 40, something like that, I think. And we'll have an completely empty end. And I just hope, if that's the case, we don't do what Arsenal did all those years ago and paint a mural and have pipe music coming from the mural to try and replicate supporters. But it's one that obviously only the real insiders, I suspect not too many at the club know, other than Daniel Levy and the head of Balfour Beatty or whoever it is that's building the scheme.
Yeah, and I think even on the back of what's been a bit of a traumatic Wembley experience so far in terms of European football, I think even more that kind of gives us that little bit of worry of how we're going to cope next season, if it is at Wembley for the whole season. I think it's going to be, from what we've seen so far, it's going to be very, very tough next season at Wembley. We've seen that in terms of our European adventure so far. I think us being in the Europa League obviously gives us that advantage to carry on playing at Wembley and, in Pochettino's words, try and make it our home. But it's always very, very hard when you've got the support you have at White Hart Lane and that crowd very much kind of on top of you. It's just not the same as Wembley. So it's going to be interesting to see in these next few months how that peters out. I mean, we've heard nothing in terms of any kind of preparation for the end of season. If there's going to be some kind of celebration at White Hart Lane, that's yet to reach us. So I think it's a case of watch this space and see what happens. We've got a question here tonight coming to you next, Ian, from Harry Charalambos, and his Twitter handle is @HasSpur92, and he asks what we've just been speaking about: is Janssen going to be sold in the summer?
To answer Harry's question, I'm going to say I don't think so. I think that he's a young man. he's got bags of potential. We've seen him play for his national side, and he's been a decent player for his national side. So I genuinely believe that we may well stick with him for at least another season, and then we'll see how we get on. Because I think that we've seen with Lamela, we were all thinking after his first season, what have we bought here? Whereas he's come good after a few seasons. So, as I said, I think we give him another season. Let's give him another season and see how we get on with him. But to answer Harry's question, I don't think he will be.
Yeah. We'll come on to you next, Jace. We've got a question here from Matt, and his Twitter handle is Force George. He asks, with Janssen not working out, should we give Harrison a shot? Can't do any worse. If
I can just partly answer Harry's one before as well about Janssen. It's interesting to see, and I'm not trying to have a go at Harry here, but isn't it strange that Batshuayi, who I know Harry wanted Batshuayi far more over Janssen, and myself personally would have preferred to go on Batshuayi, but you see the struggles that he's having, and I find it astonishing that Chelsea would be prepared to swap him for Llorente, to send Batshuayi to Swansea and take Llorente in return, because Llorente's hardly set the Premier League apart. So, it's not that easy, is it, for strikers coming into the Premier League, as we can see from even Batshuayi's troubles. Should we give Harrison a shot? I don't think Harrison, I can stand to be corrected, but I don't think he's even gone out on loan, has he, anywhere?
No, I
don't think we've even got him a League Two club on loan.
He's not ready yet, though, is he? I mean, I would argue, Jace, he's not had enough football to be ready.
That's the thing.
I mean, again,
that's the thing.
And with Janssen, you could maybe argue the same, he's not had enough, but these guys are only going to get time through the experience of playing. But I mean, for me personally, I certainly wouldn't suggest Harrison is ready for that yet. I mean, Guy needs regular football. He hasn't got it yet. Janssen, you would argue, with the amount of money we've paid and with our scouts going to watch him, they obviously felt when doing the deal that he was the player they wanted.
And I mean, as you say, we are talking about a full Dutch international. He scored goals for his country as well. So I think it probably is a bit too early from Harrison. But I understand why the bloke thinks, well, if Janssen's not scoring any goals, Harrison, if he came on and scored once in the next 30, that would be an improvement type of thing. I think probably the way they'll go is probably more to go a little bit to what we did last year. If they think Janssen's not working and they can't get someone in, I think we'll see Europa League with Son playing almost as a false striker, as he did, for much of last year when it was him or Chadley trying to fill in for Kane. And I fear that's probably the way that we'll go. They'll think, Ghent, OK, we can probably play with Son up front. I mean, he has scored, as we said, he scored goals this year, and I think, I can see that happening perhaps far more than I can see Shayon Harrison coming in.
Is Onomar far off for you, Jace? What you've seen so far, would you say he's far off?
Is Onomar off? Well, I think with Josh Onomar, I mean...
Now, what I mean is in terms of, is he far... When obviously the suggestion of that question there was Harrison maybe, but would you say Harrison is ahead of Onomar? I mean, I would suggest Onomar would probably be the more chance of getting a chance. I think Onomar's getting a start than Harrison.
Yeah, Onomar's far further down the line, but, you could almost say it's a surprise that he didn't get a start yesterday, although, I do think you do have to keep, say, 4 players from the main 11 in, rather you can't just change 11 for me. But, I think with Josh Onomar, I'm a little bit worried that he doesn't, when he's playing, he doesn't quite seem to have that hunger of Winks and one or two of the others, does he? He seems... I don't know, you just think, come on, Josh, just cut that extra half a yard in. I mean, the chance that fizzed across goal yesterday is a prime example, and his pass, I think we had a chance literally almost with the last kick of the game, didn't we? And you just thought, come on, just give me that extra, 2% that makes the difference. I think what I'd like to see with Onomar is to get a really good loan in the second half of the season. And I actually think with Carter Vickers, I said it today, interesting that Bournemouth allowed Ake to go back to Chelsea. You think they're looking for a young centre-half. They were happy with a loaney young centre-half. I'd be busting anything to try and get Carter Vickers into where Ake was, get him playing under Eddie Howe and try and get him, a genuine half a season of Premier League football in, rather than, say, playing against Ghent, playing against Wycombe Wanderers at home, and then perhaps not seeing him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think Bournemouth really, similar to Spurs, they do try and play football the right way, so it definitely would be a kind of loan that would be a really, really good option for the player and for Spurs. It'd be beneficial for both. Ian, what do you think on that question?
I'm totally with Jason on that. I think that, we only get to see how good these players are by them playing football. And you look at Harry Kane, he had spells out on loan at Millwall and Norwich, and I just think that we need to get these players regular competitive football, because that's the only time you can see whether they're going to make the grade in your own side. So, I'm 100% behind what Jason just said about Carter Vickers, and and as I said, I think Bournemouth would be an ideal place for him, because I don't think they're going to go down, so he won't have all the stresses and strains of trying to keep a side in the league. Whereas under a decent manager like Eddie Howe, he would learn a load, and I think the same exists in my mind for Onoma. I think that he could benefit from some regular competitive football. So yeah, I totally 100% agree with Jason.
Just on the loans, I think the other thing with the loan is, I understand if you keep, say, Carter Vickers and Onoma back for a game, say, with Wycombe, and you've got Ghent, I still believe that you're really wanting them to develop to Premier League players rather than Europa League or FA Cup players. The end aim is for them to play Premier League football for you, and therefore, for me, the quicker you get them playing Premier League football, whether it's at Tottenham or at another club, I'd far sooner see them playing Premier League football than the odd game here or there as backup players for cup ties.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've got to say, the loan system is very, very important. It's one that Spurs seem to have adopted over recent seasons, so fingers crossed that continues. And like I say, Harry Kane, a clear evidence there of that, how that system does work and how it benefits Spurs as a whole. We're going to stick with you, Ian. Final question of tonight, and it's from Dan Smith at Dan Smith 1984, and he asks, this is ahead of West Brom, an opportunity to temporarily go second with the top teams having some tough games. Can we take our opportunity?
Can we? Yes, we can. Will we? Our nemesis when it comes to home games against them. We've had the odd 1-0 victory. So to answer Dan's question, I'm going to say, can we? I think we have to.
Yep.
To show, not only ourselves but the rest of the league. Maybe people that have, put us way outside their radar might start to take us a bit seriously.
Yeah, well, that brings us on nicely actually to the preview of West Brom. It's going to be a tough one, isn't it? I mean, they do seem to have a hold on us at the moment, and to be fair, under Pulis this season, they've been very, very good. You've got to say that. I mean, their football, they're, in the past they've been criticised, but from when I've actually watched them, they seem to be playing some decent stuff. It's not going to be an easy game, is it at all, Jace? It's going to be one of those games again, 11 men behind the ball, break us down. Can we do it?
Well, I think you look at it, they went to Chelsea, was it in December? I think it was early December, and it was only a defensive howler really toward late on that allowed Costa to score. Then they went to Arsenal. Ben Foster had a blinder, and it was Giroud, 87 minutes. So, again, they lost 1-0 at Chelsea and 1-0 at Arsenal. We know what Tony Pulis' teams do. We know, realistically, come on, if we think back to last year, it was the West Brom game that cost us the league, not the Chelsea game, despite what the media want everyone to believe. We lost the game at home to West Brom, didn't we?
We did.
We drew the game, but we lost the title at home to West Brom. That was far more damning. It left us 8 points behind with 3 games left before we went to Chelsea. So, that was a damaging one. We know what Tony Pulis' sides do. I mean, he's great at doing just parking the bus football, isn't it? I mean, it's not the type that any of us want to watch. And even though they've brought in Chadley, that made a big difference early on, Nasser Chadley's almost gone back to some of the time Nasser Chadley that we saw, hasn't he? He's suddenly been hauled off in a few games for them and that. So it will be difficult. I think it'll be a really tight game. You look at the games at White Hart Lane, I think beat them 1-0 in 2012, then we had a 1-1 draw, then another 1-1 draw, then we lost 1-0, then we had another 1-1 draw. So, you know, it's hardly exactly as if there's 2s and 3s and 4s going in against them at any time, particularly at White Hart Lane. So I think it'll be one of those real patient, early kickoffs of funny games as well, aren't
I was going to say, Jason,
I never like the early kickoffs.
I was going to say, bearing in mind the fact that when you look at it, because we have got that pressure on us to go second, it is an early kick-off. We know the job we've done. I mean, you would probably say last season it may well have been a game that, I will use that term, we would bottle it. Ian, have we got that strength we've seen so far this season to come through this kind of game? Because there will be all the eyes on Spurs. It is a televised game. There is that added pressure that West Brom, it's not been a team that we've been able to beat at home in recent seasons. Is there enough for you in that Spurs team where you think, no, we will do this, we will get over the line? Because we saw when we beat Man City earlier in the season, it then resulted to 1 win in 10. So just how crucial is it that we get the result? Because again, we don't want to be in a position where we win a game in the magnitude we did, but then don't take advantage of it the week after.
I think that the West Brom game will be the biggest sort of like acid test as to how much as a group of players the team have progressed. Yep. Because if they go out at the weekend and they get 3 points, then it shows that they've learned. It shows that we're not the bottlers. And I agree with Jason. It was the West Brom game at home where we lost the league. I'd like to think that the team will remember that, and it will spur them on, you know, if you excuse the pun, to want to go out and overturn what has been a very, very, you know, resolute opponent over the last 5 games, as so succinctly put by Jason a minute ago.
Fingers crossed. It's definitely a game that will be, like you've just put there, lad, the acid test for Spurs. Like we've said, it's a game where last season we may not have won it. It's a season this season where we most certainly do need to win it if we are really to be considered as potential title challengers. I mean, it's an interesting one. As things stand, lads, it is 7 points the gap now. If you're being brutal, cutthroat, whatever you want to call it, are we in a potential title race here, or are you more realistic in the fact that very much is a top 4 battle, and should the title race become a little bit more open, we can look towards that? Coming to you first, Jace.
Well, I think we're in there of sorts at the moment by the nature of our position. But I think I said last week, for me, title races don't start until game number 25, 26, maybe even later than that. And I think the key for me would be to say, let's get to March, which is still 2 months' time. Let's get to March no more than, say, 5 points behind Chelsea, and then we'll say, or not necessarily even Chelsea by then. It could be somebody else who's in front. It could even be us who's in front by then. You just don't know. So I think for me, I'd look at it and just say, come on, let's get to no more than 5 points behind the leader by March the 4th, whatever that weekend is. And if that's the case, then we're in the title race. If we're 8-9 points behind and there's 3 or 4 clubs in front of us, then we're clearly only then in a top 4 battle.
No, I agree. Ian, what's your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. But, you know, not wanting to sound like a broken record, you know my views when it comes to maths and you know, you're in it until you're not in it. And I just think that, you know, I do agree with Jason in that, you know, let's see where we are in March. If we can stay where we are and we keep grinding out results and we keep this winning run going, then, you know, the closer we get to Chelsea, you know, and then, you know, who knows what might happen. So, you know, I think we are in a race with all of the other sort of like 6 teams who have sort of drawn away from the rest of the pack, sort of thing.
I think the only definitive you could probably say at the moment is that with the top 4 battle, I think there's 5 teams battling for that, because I would say that Chelsea are definitely going to finish in the top 4, because, you know, you think if they get 30 more points from 18 left, isn't it? Yeah, 18 games. So you just add on 30 points to Chelsea in 18 games. You certainly think they should do that. So I think you're saying that there's 5 teams in the race for the 3 other places. But, you know, I certainly wouldn't be sitting here saying Chelsea are my overall favourites for the Premier League. They've got the slight advantage, but You know, there's a lot of football to be played, a lot of big games to be played, and I'm certainly not prepared to wave the white flag yet and say Chelsea are definitely going to go on and win the league.
No, not at all. I completely agree. A lot to play for, like I say, and 5 wins on the bounce in terms of the league, 6 wins in terms of all competitions. I'd say a lot to play for. We've seen the squad depth we've got. We've made a lot of changes to that 11, obviously, that we played against Villa, so we should hopefully have a healthy squad going into it, fingers crossed. Let's get some predictions then for West Brom. I know it's a game we don't really want to call, but we'll come to you first, Jace. What do you think?
I go, well, you just look at the history and think it's just 1-0s, 0-1s and 1-1s. So, you know, the brain says go for a 1-0. I think we will win the game. I think Ian's right. We had that real thing to prove against Chelsea and that hunger to put things right. And I think those players, I think they'll even know that it was the West Brom game more than the Chelsea game last year that cost us. And I think they'll think, come on, it's time to sort this, and they'll be determined to build on Chelsea. So I think we will get across the line, but it's going to be one of those real nip and tuck games. I just hope the crowd are like they were for the Chelsea game rather than say like they were yesterday, because early games Saturday you don't get great atmospheres usually, and they're not always great games regardless of the teams playing. But I think we'll need that real boost from the crowd on Saturday, and that's really important that they stay with the team.
Indeed, very much so. Coming to you next, Ian, it's going to be a tough one, isn't it? We know we've touched upon it, but Tony Pulis, we know how he sets up his sides. It is going to be a very, very, very tough game for Spurs.
It is. My heart says 1-0.